and welcome to the marriage preparation course.
I want to add my welcome to Nikki's and say it's great you're doing this course, and we hope you really enjoy having 5 sessions together to focus on your relationship. We understand that engagement can be a frantic time, and organising a wedding can start to take up every waking moment.
I expect most of you have found that your wedding is costing a bit more than you'd thought, but probably not as much as the recent wedding of the 2 sons of an Indian billionaire. The 10,000 guests were flown in on 27 chartered jets, and a fleet of 200 limousines took them to the venue.
They dined on a lavish banquet, which included Italian, Chinese, Mexican, Lebanese, Mongolian and Indian food. The exact cost of the wedding is unknown, but was estimated to be around $75 million. We hope that that makes yours seem a lot more reasonable.
We also looked up the longest engagement in the Guinness Book of Records, which was between Octavio Gillen and Adriana Martinez. They got engaged in 1902 and finally took the plunge in Mexico City 67 years later. By then, they were both aged 82 and they probably thought they didn't have much to lose.
So, whether you're in your 20s or your 80s, whether you've been engaged for a short time or a long time, we hope that these 5 sessions will be a bit like an oasis for you both, to think about the journey of marriage that you're about to embark on.
Our experience is that marriage is the most exciting and the most challenging adventure that we can undertake. We've been married for 28 years. When we first got married, we were both students. Then I became a teacher while Scilla was still at art college. We've now got 4 children, a girl and 3 boys, aged 24, 22, 19 and 17. And our daughter has recently got married, so we've now got a new son-in-law as well.
So we know something of what you're going through with all the organising. The whole thing's still very fresh in our minds. We've been doing this marriage preparation course since 1985, and we absolutely love running it. What we've discovered from talking to a lot of married couples and from our own experience is that strong marriages don't develop automatically.
We hope that over this course you'll discover the attitudes and values, the tools and habits needed to build a healthy marriage that lasts a lifetime.
If you start building good patterns in your relationship today, you'll be reaping the effects of those choices in 5, 10, 20 years' time.
We asked reporter Brenda Amanis to take a look at why marriage preparation is so important in today's society.
Everything you could possibly need for your big day, from chocolate fountains to diamante tiaras. Did you know that in the last 6 years, the cost of the average wedding in the UK has increased by 50%? Looking at all the things that you have to make decisions on, from your cakes, your invitation, your dress, it's no surprise to realise that the average wedding takes 250 hours to organise. But how much planning do a bride and groom put into making sure that their marriage will last?
No, not at all. We haven't really seen the need to.
Yeah, we spent a day with the church thinking about what marriage meant to us and what we meant to each other, family values, that type of thing.
We did go and see the vicar.
Yeah, I did speak to the vicar about it, that's for sure.
He sort of gave us the what to do and what not to do type of thing.
I think it just took us outside of all the arranging for the marriage itself and made us think about what we were actually doing, being together.
In the UK, 40% of first-time marriages break down. That means for every 3 couples, 1 will end in divorce. A sobering thought, but not one that these couples will be thinking about.
If you want to learn to play a musical instrument, you take lessons. You want to learn to drive, then you take lessons. Sadly, when it comes to marriage, we do so little at learning how to create a healthy marriage and make it last.
Well, we got married about 9 years ago, and before we got married, we were handed a form we had to fill in great detail about our finances and what we'd expect to spend on things. And answering simple questions like, what do you expect to pay for a family birthday present, meant we were able to have conversations we might never have had and really helped us prepare for married life together.
Yes, it was a very positive time to spend some time together during marriage preparation. But since then, obviously, during 9 years, things have come up that have, at times, knocked us sideways. And we've had to deal with those things and sit down and talk and work through them together. And we've recently done a course that has been fantastic because it's made us talk about things that we wouldn't think to talk about or not necessarily want to talk about. And we've had to work through things together, and it's been very beneficial for us.
I guess we remain lifelong learners. We've never arrived in this kind of thing. We're always learning.
And so, if a couple wants to ensure their marriage, not just the wedding day, it seems the answer is to keep investing in their relationship.
Good marriages generally don't just happen. They take time and effort, and that doesn't mean it's hard work, but it just means that you have to keep trying at it. You must prioritise your relationship. It's all about having a positive attitude which allows you to communicate really well. And if you do that, if you choose us as a priority, if you take time for us, and if you think in terms of the longer term, if you talk about your future and you always see arguments are smaller than the marriage, that's what makes a great marriage. Dedication.
We're going to be looking at what dedication means in practice. This course is very practical. Over the 5 sessions, Nikki and I will talk about different issues and then get you as a couple to discuss them.
Amongst other things, we'll be talking about how to communicate effectively,
how to resolve conflict,
how to meet each other's emotional needs,
how to build a friendship,
how to develop our sexual relationship,
and how to decide who does what. For example, who takes on the different roles.
One of the benefits of this course will be discovering whether you're coming into marriage with different expectations.
These might be the result of your upbringing. Sometimes it's only when we get married that we realise some of our deeply held assumptions about life are not universally shared.
We'll give you 2 very trivial examples from our own marriage. It took us several years to realise where these different expectations came from.
The first difference is to do with the car. When we got married, I expected that Nikki would want to keep the car filled up with fuel. I suppose that's because my father hardly ever lets the fuel gauge in their car go below halfway.
My father, on the other hand, would only fill up if he really had to. I think he thought it was a waste of time and was quite prepared to take the risk of running out. I do also remember him explaining to me that it's cheaper to run a car on the second half of the tank, as then the car's lighter. So I find I'm quite happy driving around with the warning light indicating we're nearly empty. Anyway, I think it makes the journey a bit more exciting.
Well, it makes it more exciting for him, but it's a nightmare for me. The second difference is to do with this, cling film or food wrap. And the second is to do with this, kitchen paper.
I find it very difficult to come to terms with how much of these Scylla used, and actually still uses, because my mother never used them. She always regarded them as incredibly extravagant. And if she wanted to keep leftovers, she'd put them in a plastic container. And if she needed to wipe something up, she'd use a cloth that she could wash and use again. I think she has some cling film and kitchen paper at home, but a roll of either would certainly last her at least 5 years.
My mother, on the other hand, must have used several miles of both, and I suppose I take after her.
When we first got married, if we went into overdraft, I was convinced it was because Scylla had used too much cling film and kitchen paper.
We didn't realise for some time why these issues caused friction between us, until we reflected on the expectations we'd inherited from our upbringing.
Of course, there are likely to be much more serious differences to deal with, especially if you come from different cultures. And it's a great help to recognise and to discuss these.
Each session, we'll be hearing from a selection of other married couples, talking about their experiences. We've called these our sofa couples. If you've seen the film When Harry Met Sally, you'll understand where we got our inspiration for the sofa.
And we'll also have a studio interview with a married couple. And later on in this programme, we'll be hearing from Paul and Jules, who've been married for 2 years, and who'll be talking about their own experience of married life. And we'll give you lots of opportunities as a couple during the sessions to discuss together what we've been talking about.
You'll also see we've recommended some books on relationships in the back of the manual, including our own The Marriage book, which covers a lot more than we can fit into the course. If at any time during the course you get stuck and feel you'd want extra help, please ask your course leaders, who'll be happy to find someone that you can talk to.
We want to start the course by talking about communication, because this really is a vital aspect of any healthy relationship. We've travelled the country to find out what people believe about relationships. And this is what people in Wales said about the importance of communication.
Why is communication so important in marriage?
It gives a much better relationship.
If you don't communicate, you're not going to get on.
Makes you understand each other better and what vibes we're working on.
You need to communicate with the other half. You've got to let them know what you're doing, what's happening, otherwise you're going to be doing your own thing and there's no point in being together.
Well, if you don't communicate in a marriage, then there's nothing really. I mean, how do you know what the other one's feeling?
If you don't communicate, there's no relationship with it at the end of the day.
You have to communicate. It's the most important part of a marriage, I think.
Talk.
Talking.
Talking.
Talk. Talk. Talking.
Nowadays you've got mobile phones, you've got email, just keep in contact, keep telling each other what's going on, what you're doing, how you're feeling.
Make time for each other, I think.
Well, you've got to be prepared to listen to other people's point of view. Doesn't always work, but...
Doesn't always work, no.
You've got to give 100% effort.
You've got to talk about it.
Yeah. Do things together.
Yeah.
That's what I do.
And telling each other that you love each other on a regular basis helps as well.
What causes communication breakdown?
By not communicating.
Jealousy.
Secrecy.
Misunderstanding.
Selfishness.
Jealousy is usually the breakdown to most relationships all over the world.
If you keep secrets from one another, there will be a breakdown eventually.
But you've just got to work around these things.
So we can't take communication in marriage for granted. Communication involves both talking effectively and listening effectively. We have to learn and go on learning how to be good communicators.
And marriage is probably the best training ground, not least because it's the most challenging.
It's helpful to recognise at the outset that we're all different in the way we communicate. Our communication is affected by several factors. We want to look at three in particular: our personality, our background, and our circumstances.
Let's start with the first thing, our personality.
We're all very different. Some people are extroverts. They tend to think out loud. Other people are introverts. They like to organise their thoughts in their heads first before they speak.
If I'm going to say something, I usually think things through. So if I make a suggestion, it's usually actually pretty much decided in my head. I've been through several arguments and I have come to a conclusion, even if it's just about what to have for breakfast. Whereas Richard will throw out suggestions willy-nilly.
Well, I wouldn't say it's willy-nilly. I mean, this is where our difference is. The suggestions that I throw out will be suggestions
lateral.
that will be completely lateral suggestions. Maybe no, the suggestions that I would come up with, my brain works differently. Whereas Poof will speak very concretely about what she has already decided. I like to talk through my suggestions and bring them out into the open and discuss them. So we both have a very different approach, but I think we've really both learnt about each other that those approaches are just different ways of doing things, and we're starting to learn to tolerate each other, but it's taken time and it still takes us time to get used to it.
Well, Richard will often say, oh, let's have pancakes for breakfast, but won't have counted eggs. And I will only suggest pancakes if I know there's eggs, flour, bicarb and maple syrup in the fridge.
But when we get the pancakes, they're worth waiting for.
Another way that we're different is that some people are more logical. They work things out methodically, sometimes very slowly. Other people are more intuitive. They act on hunches and may jump to conclusions.
During the course, you'll find out quite a lot about Nikki and myself. You'll probably realise that I'm more of an intuitive extrovert, while Nikki is more of a logical introvert. And that's about as different as you can get. If I'm worried about something, I need to talk it out as soon as possible.
She often says something to me with great passion and conviction and then changes her mind 5 minutes later. So I've discovered over the years that it's better not to react too quickly. Meanwhile, I need time and space to sort out an issue in my head first on my own and then tell Scilla what I think.
But for me, that's not a discussion, just his conclusion.
So, as you can see, before we've even started to express our own points of view, our ways of communicating are very different because of our personalities.
There was an example of that the other day when we were in the car and I was chatting to Nicky about a big party that my parents were planning and all the different relations who were coming. I wanted him to help me work out the dynamics of who should sit next to who and so on. And he seemed a little bit distracted. When I asked him what he was thinking about, he hesitated for a moment and then admitted with slight embarrassment that he'd been trying to work out in his head how much it was going to cost to get up to Scotland for the party and whether it was cheaper to drive or go on the train.
Well, in the end, we didn't do either, actually. We found a cheap flight. OK, time for your first discussion. We've told you about ourselves, but how do you differ in the way that you communicate? Please turn in your manuals to the first exercise in session 1, and it's called How We Communicate. And we'd like you to take a few minutes to tell your fiancé how you think their personality affects the way that they communicate. And we're going to give you 5 minutes. The second thing that affects our communication is our family background. That will be different for every couple, and it's well worth trying to recognise what the differences are. Once we recognise them, then we can learn to work with them.
In terms of communication in our families, we've taken a lot of what we do now from our background. So Jason's grown up in a family where there are many, many men. So apart from his mum and his one sister, he's got like 4 brothers. And I guess in their family, they don't like to talk things through as much, so they might like to do activities and might like to play table tennis and so on. Whereas in my family, it's more female-dominated, and so we like to talk, because talking is a good thing, as BT will tell you. And again, we've had to learn to talk more, but also have times when we can just do stuff and not necessarily have to be speaking.
That's true. I guess my family is more spontaneous. We're not planners, which is the way now I approach things. I don't tend to plan things as closely as Amy does. And yeah, we generally don't talk things through. Things just tend to happen in our family, and you know, and then it's news to all of us. And that's kind of how we've always lived, and that's kind of how we are when we get together. Whereas it's very different at Amy's family. With Amy's family, that they tend to talk things through and discuss things months in advance.
No two families are the same. Some families air their differences immediately. Others delay or avoid talking about their differences at all.
Some families are quiet. Other families are much louder.
Some are more volatile. Others are calmer.
Some take it in turns to talk. Others frequently interrupt.
Nicky and my families, in contrast to our personalities, are very similar in many respects, but their styles of communication are very different. My family was definitely of the loud variety.
Well, mine was rather quieter, and at meal times that difference was very obvious. I remember vividly the first time I met Scylla's family. I went to stay with them, and I arrived just as they were sitting down to eat.
My family tend to talk at the top of their voices all at once, while eating at great speed. Nicky, on the other hand, listened intently to everyone, always put his knife and fork down while he talked, and never talked with his mouth full.
Well, as I was the new boyfriend, her family were asking me loads of questions. So by the time they'd all finished, I was only on my second mouthful.
Then, after we sat and waited for him to finish, my mother offered him a second helping. I think Nicky wanted to make a good impression and to show that he liked my mother's cooking, so he accepted, at which point I inwardly groaned.
Another difference between many couples is that in some families, where they take it in turns to talk, interrupting is seen as rude. Whereas in another family, interrupting is a sign of interest, and not to interrupt is seen as boring or being unconcerned.
We're going to give you a chance now to think about the way your own family communicated as you were growing up. Then you'll be able to look at whether this is different to your fiancé's experience.
We want you to turn in your manuals now to the next exercise that's called Family Styles of Communication. First, mark with an X where you think your own family comes on the lines between the two extremes. Each of you do this on your own and then discuss with your fiancé what you've each put. And we're going to give you 10 minutes to do this. The third thing that will affect our communication is our circumstances. For example, our jobs. Our working patterns may well be very different from one another. One of you may be a nurse doing shift work, marrying someone with more regular working hours. Or you may have to travel a lot, or you may be going through a stressful period, such as changing jobs or moving house. In these circumstances, finding time when you're both relaxed and feel like communicating can be quite a challenge.
Yeah, we've come across particular circumstances that have made communication difficult, and I think the thing that's happening even still now is just the fact we've been moving house for such a long time. It's been, I don't know, 18 months or something we've been trying to move house for, and it just dominates our conversation. It can do, and we found it's actually good to just not talk about it and to put it to one side, but that can also be frustrating because then you're not communicating about the thing that you're feeling really upset about or, you know, is draining you. So that's been quite hard.
Yeah, and
it?
I find that I'm a sort of person that Heather's very good at drawing me out to talk about what is really going on, what am I really feeling about it, because my tendency will just be to avoid it. And yet there'll be lots going on under the surface which is affecting us, and you know, we're getting tired or grouchy with each other. So about the flat move, for example, it's like, you know, Heather's very helpful at drawing me out and saying, how are you really feeling about it at the moment? What's really going on for you? And that's been helpful, but it's not something I'll naturally do.
Our communication will also be affected by children if and when we have them. They alter our lives radically. The effect of broken nights, tiredness, and not having so much time together can stop us having any proper conversations.
The circumstances that put pressure on us may come from outside our relationship, such as unemployment, financial struggles, bereavement.
Or we may face pressure from circumstances within our marriage, such as miscarriage, the inability to have children, or a major illness.
I think one of the most difficult circumstances in our marriage has been when about 20 years ago I had a breakdown and the communication there had just broken. That was it, you know, we weren't communicating at all, and after being in a hospital for a few weeks you realise you had to start talking to me, and we suddenly got communicating with each other and talking about lots of different issues over a period of time, and
It was quite interesting because before it all happened, I thought everything was okay, and then when Christine had a breakdown and she came out of hospital, we realised, and we just used to walk for miles and miles and talk. Well, Christine used to talk and talk most of the time, and we just used to walk everywhere, didn't we, for hours on end. And it was just nice, actually, also being able to spend the time together.
We just learnt a lot about each other and what we were really thinking.
When we're under pressure for whatever reason, most of us revert to the behaviour we learned when we were growing up. That could be shutting down, getting irritable or really heated, hiding emotionally, or going on the attack.
So, as we can see, these different dimensions of personality, background and circumstances all contribute to the way that we communicate with one another.